5? I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good evening, it's me, Bev Turner, in for Michelle again tonight at the end of an historically horrific week in the Middle East. I've got Martin Daubney and Paul Embry tonight to discuss whether protests and celebrations for and against Israel and Hamas in this country should be banned. Also, are you feeling pressured to take a side in this debate, even though you may feel that it's got absolutely nothing to do with you? And if so, where is that pressure coming from? And as escaped prisoner Daniel Khalif appears in court, the issue of surveillance cameras is back on the news agenda. Do you want more or fewer cameras on our streets reading your face? Plus, Lloyds Bank have offered counselling to any of their employees traumatised by what was said about women being women at the Tory party conference. I think that moving away from our biology is not the way forward. Do you? First, though, here's the very latest news with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good evening to you at 6 o'clock here in the GB Newsroom. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Israel says its infantry has carried out localised raids in Gaza in an effort to locate Hamas rocket sites and hostages. Thousands of Palestinians are fleeing northern Gaza after the Israeli army ordered more than 1 million people to move south by the end of the day for their own safety. Israeli airstrikes are continuing, with a ground invasion thought to be imminent. However, the Rafah border to Egypt in the south of Gaza remains closed. The United Nations has called on Israeli authorities to withdraw the evacuation order, saying it's impossible without devastating humanitarian consequences. And this news just into us in the last half an hour or so. A Reuters video journalist has been killed while working in southern Lebanon. Issam Abdallah was part of a team based near the Israeli border, providing a live signal. Two other Reuters journalists, Thayer al-Sudani and Maher Nazeh, were also injured. Reuters say they're seeking more information. They're working with authorities and supporting Issam's family and colleagues. Meanwhile, the president of the European Commission was forced to evacuate to a shelter earlier after arriving in Israel this afternoon. Well, Ursula von der Leyen was meeting the Israeli President Isaac Herzog when sirens were heard, warning of possible strikes. Well, the EU chief earlier offered her solidarity with the Israeli people after last weekend's attack by Hamas, which killed more than 1,300 people. Ms von der Leyen visiting one of the towns attacked by Hamas. And meanwhile, the US Secretary of Defense says Washington's support for Israel is ironclad. In a joint press conference with his Israeli counterpart, Lord Austin said munitions, air defences and other equipment are being deployed, with the US ready to supply more weaponry and aid. Well, the Israeli Defence Forces continue to amass tanks and soldiers near the border of Gaza, with the ground invasion looking increasingly likely. And more than 1,700 people have died in the enclave as a result of Israeli airstrikes. Tensions also building on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. Troops there are on high alert after the Hezbollah terror group said it would ignore calls to stay out of the conflict. Meanwhile, London has seen a massive increase in anti-Semitic incidents since the conflict began. That's according to the Metropolitan Police. The force cited examples such as the playing of German military music and the intimidation of people outside synagogues. Several Jewish schools in North London were closed earlier today because of concerns for the children's safety. The government's announced an additional £3 million of funding to provide the UK's Jewish population with extra security. The Prime Minister says terrorism must not prevail in Israel or in Ukraine. Rishi Sunak has been meeting northern European allies in Sweden. The gathering comes amid concerns about the possible sabotage of an undersea gas pipeline between Finland and Estonia. He called the Joint Expeditionary Force the first line of defence against the threat posed by the Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The value of this group is our agility, our expertise in the areas that matter, particularly in supporting Ukraine right now, which we'll talk about, but also our deep commitment to the cause of upholding the rules-based international system and, in particular, protecting the security of the region that is very near and dear to us.
A teacher has been killed and two others injured in a knife attack in France. It happened at a high school in the northern city of Arras. A suspect's been arrested. Police say he is a Russian-born Chechen and a former student of the high school. One of the teachers has described what he saw.
We are all in shock. I discovered the horror of the situation when I left, since it was on my way out that I discovered one of our colleagues had been stabbed in the neck and died in front of the school. So, here we have a professor who was killed and another who was quite seriously injured.
And Nigel Farage has been rebanked for personal and business accounts. Lloyds has accepted the GB News presenter after 10 other banks rejected him. Mr Farage was involved in a public row with NatWest in July after the group closed his bank accounts, apparently because of his political views. He says he's pleased to see one high street lender isn't politically prejudiced. We are live across the UK on TV, on digital radio, and if you want us on your smart speaker, just say play GB News. That's it for the moment. Now it's over to Bev.
Very good evening. It's 6:05. This is Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, this evening. Joining me until 7 o'clock. I'm delighted to say trade unionist and author Paul Embry is here with us, and also GB News presenter, former Brexit Party MEP Martin Daubney. You get in touch with me as well this evening. Let us know your thoughts on everything that we are talking about. GBViews at gbnews.com or on Twitter at GBnews. So, We're almost a week on. I'm afraid the news coming in from Israel doesn't get any better. Israel says that its infantry has carried out localised raids in Gaza in an effort to locate Hamas rocket sites and hostages. It's after 1.1 million people were given 24 hours to get out. Civilians are fleeing northern Gaza by car, on the back of trucks and on foot. A ground invasion is thought to be imminent. I think we're going to try and get to Charlie Peters, who is live in Tel Aviv for us this evening. Oh, he is here. Charlie, you are there. Good. I'm so glad to open the show with you with the very latest. First of all, how are you? Like, how is it being out there at a time like this and doing this job? Is it incredibly tense and stressful? And is it genuinely is there risk to life for you?
It is tense, it is stressful, and it is non-stop. The reports of extreme violence across the country do just keep flowing in every hour. Overnight, we're sleeping without any earpods in, as I usually would at home, because we need to be alert to air raid sirens for rocket attacks. Just a few hours ago, just before we were meant to go live, another siren went off and we had to head down to the shelter. That's the situation in detail in Tel Aviv, but across the country in the last hour, in the north of the country, we've seen the IDF conducting drone strikes on Lebanese Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon. And we've also seen, I think, the most significant development of the last week now, since those attacks started on Saturday, the IDF conducting what it called localised raids within the Gaza Strip. So Israel has put boots on the ground within that territory for the first time. It said it was conducting operations to destroy anti-tank positions and also attempt to retrieve hostages. So it's yet more shaping activity for that likely ground invasion. And it comes amid, of course, a great sense of terror across the country that has swept the nation in the last 7 days. Netanyahu posts himself as Mr. Security. The country has this mystique as an immense military superpower despite its size. And of course, that sensation has been dampened by those appalling atrocities seen on Saturday morning. And now the IDF is seeking to reassert itself and the beginning of that likely ground incursion into the Gaza Strip.
Charlie, do we have any latest on the casualties or how many people are thought to have lost their lives on both sides?
Well, it's well over 1,000 on both sides. I mean, over 1,500 Hamas terrorists killed, at least within southern Israel. I think the figure in Gaza is approaching 1,000 in terms of those killed by IDF airstrikes. And in Israel, on the Israeli side, at least 1,200 killed, of which 220 were Israeli soldiers. Of that 220, though, many of those Israeli soldiers were not mobilised at the time. They self-mobilised. They were just reservists or off-duty soldiers who heard about the danger and drove to it without waiting for orders. But sadly, those numbers are almost certainly set to rise very dramatically as the Israeli forces tell Gazans to flee from the north of the Strip so they can prepare for an even more severe and targeted bombing campaign. They hit 750 targets last night. I think it's highly likely they'll hit more tonight to soften the ground for their ground forces to enter into the Strip imminently.
And Charlie, is most of the bombing during the night or in daylight hours?
Well, we've heard fighter jets buzzing up and down this coastline day and night, rearming, refueling, and then heading back down south to Gaza to hit Hamas military capabilities. I think the bulk of the strikes do happen overnight, but they are continuing throughout the day because the pattern here is that the IDF strikes at night and then Hamas come out of their shelters in the morning where they have bunkers and those intricate tunnelling systems throughout the Gaza Strip. They take themselves out of those bunkers and they rapidly set up rocket positions to fire across the country. They hit Ashkelon today, about 20 kilometres north of the Strip. They also hit Ashdod, areas in southern Israel, and rockets were intercepted over our location about 3 hours ago. The interceptions were extremely loud as the Iron Dome missile defense system hit those rockets from Hamas in Gaza. So that's the kind of pattern of life here in terms of the rocket fire and the airstrikes going in, but that is going to likely continue over the coming days as well.
OK, all right, Charlie. Thank you very much. Charlie Peters there out in Tel Aviv. I find that sort of detail astonishing, Paul, don't you? The idea that Israel is bombing the IDF throughout the night and then in the morning Hamas kind of crawl out of their tunnels at dawn. Just your reaction, please, to what's happened over the last nearly a week now, because it's stomach-turning, isn't it, when we see the detail?
It's a human tragedy and it's heartbreaking. And I was saying to Martin off air, I've been to the region back in 2014. I stood by the wire at the Gaza border. I was in Sterot, which was viciously attacked. And when you think of the beauty of the land and the history of the land, that ancient region, and Israel itself being, and the Palestinian territories being relatively small, I think Israel's the size of Wales. And you think what it has suffered, you think of the experiences that people have gone through. I think, you know, what they suffered last Saturday and in the days afterwards was as bad as anything they've experienced within 50 years. And you completely understand Israel thinking we need to exercise our right to self-defence, entirely understandable. But I would say there's not a hierarchy of suffering when it comes to innocent people. And when you see some of the, I mean, Hamas are, you know, wicked barbarians. We all know that. We accept that. And if they were wiped out, I don't think any of us would shed any tears. But when you look at innocent Gazans, many of whom don't support Hamas, some do, but many don't. And you see, I saw footage yesterday of a distraught father pulling his toddler son out of the rubble. You understand that actually there is acute suffering on both sides, and there's no easy answer to how we resolve it. And the tragedy is it's going to get a damn sight worse in the next few weeks.
It is going to get a damn sight worse, Martin, isn't it? Do you have any crystal ball, do you think, about what's going to go next? I've been asking everybody that this week, and it's impossible to know, isn't it?
Hamas will be eviscerated. They'll go the way of ISIS, and they deserve to go the way of ISIS, particularly what they've wreaked upon the Jewish community with strong echoes of the Holocaust, the barbarity. I was on breakfast last Saturday when this story broke, and we were just absolutely couldn't believe what was happening, and it's got worse since. And not only that, but Hamas were their own propagandists by posting the butchery, the barbarity on social media, gleeful of what they'd done. But there's no sympathy for these people, and we have to admit they are fascists.
But they can't be obliterated, can they? Eviscerated was the word used, which is a brilliant word. They can't be eviscerated because you can't kill an ideology, and this surely is creating the next generation of jihadists and the next generation of Hamas supporters.
Well, ISIS were wiped out. You know, the Israelis won't stop until they've done everything they can to wipe these people off the face of the earth.
Were they wiped out, or did they not just morph into a different? I mean, look at, you know, we only have to look at Afghanistan now, and that's not a peaceful zone.
No, but they, in terms of an organised, cohesive military and you know, moral threat, they were shoved to one side, and deservedly so. And this lot are just as bad, and the tendrils are now poisoning the West. We're seeing, you know, in Brussels today, you know, pro-Palestinian protesters glorifying the violence last week, calling for jihad. In Europe, we saw the same in Rome. We've seen stabbings in France, a terror attack confirmed by Emmanuel Macron. We've seen embassy staff, Israeli embassy staff in China, stabbed by terror sympathisers. We've got a protest in London tomorrow, and I sincerely believe it's going to be bad. I think it's going to kick off.
Do you?
I do.
Do you think it should be banned, Paul?
No, I don't think it should be banned. I think within the Palestinian cause, there are many people who are opposed to Hamas. There's a tradition of support for the Palestinian cause, which doesn't in any sense show sympathy for Hamas. For example, you have Labour Friends of Palestine, you have Trade Union Friends of Palestine, you even have Conservative Friends of Palestine.
But is it appropriate for those people who support Palestine to be out on the streets now, burning fireworks, raising flags?
I think it would be legitimate for them, whether or not people agree with their take on it. I think it is legitimate if people feel that the Israeli response is in danger of being disproportionate. So, for example, the siege of Gaza, the denial of water and fuel and food into Gaza. If they feel that the 24-hour window for the evacuation to get 1.1 million people out of the north of Gaza on broken roads, which is, people were in intensive care in
but you
hospitals.
think that's justified?
Well, what I'm saying is I think it is legitimate, and many of those people who do go on the streets will be peaceful people with no time for Hamas who will be raising issues like the ones that I've just raised.
So a proportionate response, would you think it'd be acceptable then for Israel to behead, to set fire, to torture, to rape people? That would be a proportionate response.
No.
So this idea that the response has to be proportionate is a fallacy, and it's damaging. They've had untold misery piled upon them. They've had untold misery piled. But what I'm saying is this idea of proportionality is gone. Hamas went too far. They committed genocide. This is not war.
But it depends how you measure proportionality, because there's a very good risk now that Israel, the IDF, will kill more people if you want to do it in terms of a body count.
Hamas don't care about their own population. They're using them as human shields.
I agree.
This is the key thing. An assessment needs to be made of whether the action taken, the benefits outweigh the detriment of it. So, for example, if they fire a missile through Hamas headquarters and they take out 40 Hamas leaders, I wouldn't shed a tear, you wouldn't shed a tear, I suspect most decent people wouldn't shed a tear. But if they fire a missile at a building where there's one kind of low-ranking Hamas activist, but 50 innocent people, including children, then there is a danger that it's not proportionate and it does contravene international law.
Haven't they dropped...
So that proportion is a really important thing.
But haven't they dropped leaflets and given due warning and said, clear out of there because we're coming in?
Well, where are they going to go?
Warning.
Where are those 1.1 million people going to go?
Well, you'd assume that they would start the intense bombing and the ground invasion in the north and move south, and hopefully the population, like a tsunami, will get ahead. But Hamas are saying, don't leave. They want them to stay because they want to use them as human shields. What did Hamas think would happen to Palestine after they committed what they did last Saturday? There's only ever going to go one way, and unfortunately, the collateral damage, that horrible phrase, inevitably is going to happen, and I think Hamas brought that upon their own population.
They did, but I would be very reluctant to say that the evil that Hamas is, somehow that gives Israel a blank check, because we say, look, what Hamas did was absolutely terrible. We're all agreed on that, and Israel's entitled to respond. And anything thereafter that happens is always going to be attributable to Hamas. I don't think you can give Israel a blank check. I think you can say to Israel, look, we absolutely defend your right to self-defence. Absolutely, you need to hit back. Wipe out Hamas if you're able to do it, but you do need to exercise proportion, because what we don't want are hundreds and thousands, possibly, of innocent Gazans, including children, killed when there isn't actually much military gain from some of them.
The IDF don't want that. Israel doesn't want that. Nobody wants that.
No, I think you're right.
Help me understand a little bit. Why is it that more left-leaning people support the Palestine cause? And I know you're not making excuses for Hamas. You accept the brutality of what they did. But I'm so interested in the right-left distinction when it comes to this debate. What is it?
Well, some on the left support Israel. I went to the region with trade union Friends of Israel, and Israel, the whole idea of it, many people would say, was quite socialist at the outset, and you've got things like kibbutz and stuff that. But at the same time, many people on the left see Israel as a pariah because of what they regard as its oppression of Arabs, and in particular the Palestinians. Also because they look at...
Who you view as the underdog.
Who they view as the underdog, and they look at the alliance, the strong alliance, the unbreakable alliance almost between Israel and the United States, and they also see the United States as public enemy number one. So,
but why would the left see the United States as public enemy number one?
I think because, well, I mean, it depends at the time whether or not there's a right-wing government in all United States governments are right-wing to a larger or less...
Not sure I agree with you on that.
Slightly lesser degree, but if there's a particularly right-wing government, whether it's Trump or Reagan, then obviously that mood would be heightened. But the relationship with Israel is a key one.
I would consider myself an old-fashioned, sensible lefty, and I've never understood the fetishization, the fetish of Palestine. It baffled me as a youth, it baffles me to this day, and now the mask has slipped. This is about hating the West. It's about hating capitalism. It's about slandering the West for everything it's ever done through the prism of the biggest sin, while, by the way, forgiving the sins, the barbarity of what's happened. A lot of people today are celebrating on the streets of Western cities glorifying the violence, the rape, the destruction, right? And it's gone too far. The left needs to admit a lot of them have been useful idiots. They've been holding the doors to the citadel open while people come into our country that want to destroy our way of life. And the left need to hold their hands up. Hamas is a cancer, and the left have willed it on. Now is the time to call it out. Where's the people like Gary Lineker been this week? Where have people gone? And don't forget, anti-Semitism, a driving part of the treachery of the left, anti-Semitism, the Corbynistas. They're the ones that supported Hamas before now. They're the ones that need to apologise to the West today.
OK, great start, fellas. Right, coming up, still to come today, I want to ask you, do you feel pressure to take a side amid this conflict? We're going to see footage after the break of two women in London tearing down posters of missing Israeli children. Don't go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, millionaires are flocking to Emmanuel Macron's France for lower taxes. This war on the wealthy has got to end. We need their money. And in My Take at 10, the BBC, the Premier League and the Football Association are deafening in their silence about innocent Israeli civilians. They bring shame on our country. We're live at 9.
Good evening, 6:24 on Friday night. We've got to the end of the week. This is Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, keeping me company until 7 o'clock. Trade unionist and author Paul Embry is here, and GB News presenter and former Brexit Party MEP Martin Daubney. Now, I'm sure you've seen the footage of various celebrations, you might call them, from all around the world. Sydney, New York, London. Well, this footage emerged today. It's been shared widely on social media. It's two women, young women, barely out of their teens, tearing down posters of missing Israeli children believed to have been abducted by Hamas. This is in London. Take a look.
Why don't you do something for Palestine? Why don't you... This is for Palestine. They're not mutually exclusive. It's children. It's children. It's innocent people. Okay, what about the children in Palestine? That's not. It doesn't make it. Why? Jesus.
How unbelievably shocking. The Metropolitan Police said it's aware of the footage, it's being assessed. The FA has been branded spineless for refusing to light up Wembley Stadium, marching Israel's colours. And it begs the question, do you feel pressured to take a side? And if so, where's that pressure coming from? Martin, go.
That footage there has to be a hate crime. You know, if posting a tweet of a transphobic limerick is a hate crime, if posing a picture of the trans flag as a swastika gets you 7 coppers and a meat wagon to turn up at your house, how is that not immediate chokey? Yeah. Especially like within a week of the atrocities committed in Israel against its population. This is outright provocation, and I just don't understand how we've got to a situation where the Israeli community, uniquely it seems on the planet, is expected just to take this.
It's
just
awful.
To take it, you know, passively and without complaint. And why is this not incitement to riot? Why is it not incitement to racial hatred? And this is before the protest tomorrow, which I think is going to kick off majorly. Yeah. And why would it not? If you saw that happening in your community, Jewish children afraid to go to school, closing schools. You know, Gary Lineker's the one saying, reminiscent of 1930s Germany about Suella Braverman. This is exactly like 1930s Germany. Where's Lineker? Yeah. Where's Vorderman? Where are they all? They're silent because they're cowards.
I was really upset by that footage, Paul, I have to say. And it's the stupidity of it, of those girls in the headscarves. They're pulling down. If it wasn't clear from the footage, those are photographs of missing babies, missing toddlers. They were put up, I think, by the girl filming the footage, who just returned from Israel. Yeah. So she's just trying to raise awareness. And who knows? She just wants these pictures of these lost people to be seen. And these idiots come along and they don't even put them in the bin. They leave them on the floor like that. Absolute disregard.
It's a reflection. I don't necessarily think it would qualify as a hate crime.
Why not?
Appalling though it was. But nonetheless, it is certainly a reflection of those two individuals. I don't know what would compel anyone to think, if they saw a poster of an innocent person who'd either been kidnapped or was missing in a conflict, a really appalling conflict, what would possess that person to say, I'm going to rip that down and stop other people from viewing it, unless they were so consumed by their own kind of warped ideology that they believed that the lives of these innocent people were inherently worthless, which clearly those people do.
And now we're getting somewhere, because that's precisely what it is. These people have been poisoned and radicalised in our own country.
I was just going to say, there's no accent. Those girls have got London accents. They've been educated in this country.
Clearly,
and they still hate Jewish people.
But for me, the punishment should be the opprobrium of wider society, and I think it
How do we
probably
do that,
will
though? How do we do that? Because as soon as you speak out against something like that...
I think the fact that we've shown it just now on national TV, I think the fact that they've been over the newspapers, they've been on other channels, I think the fact that their actions have been brought to the public's attention will hopefully make those individuals feel a little bit of heat. And
but if you put the boot on the other foot and you were tearing down pictures of murdered Muslims, you'd be inside a prison jail. Right now,
Martin,
you'd be in a cell.
Martin,
right now.
We can't
know it.
Yeah, but come on, we can't have it both ways. You and I know, have voiced concern in the past about the threshold for hate crimes getting lower and lower and lower. And things, you mentioned it yourself, things like, you know, hurty words on a tweet being regarded as a hate crime. If we say, look, we are concerned over that threshold getting ever more lower, and we want to live in a free society where even the most appalling views should be aired because we want to be able to challenge those views in a free society. We can't then say, but for things that we disagree with, and that actually, in this case, the vast majority of decent people would disagree with, we want them arrested.
It's about proportionality.
I think if it comes to if people are inciting violence, or if they're I don't know if that's it's an appalling act, but I don't think it's specifically inciting violence. I think what they've done is ripped a poster down because they don't value that person's life on the poster. I think in that situation, the condemnation of wider society, which thankfully they're receiving, should be the answer rather than police intervention.
Is this, you know, what I wanted us to talk about here, and it's inevitable, we are going to discuss the rights and wrongs of that disgraceful act, is this culture that we now live in, Martin, where everybody feels that they have to take a side. Very easy for me when I've seen that footage to take a side. But it's very difficult for most people, I think, to really feel like they've got skin in this game. You know, there'll be a lot of people here going, well, hang on, this is going over in the Middle East. Actually, then you see footage like that and you realise it isn't. That is deeply naive for us to think that if you don't live as a Jew in this country and you don't know what you face every day. But we live in an age, don't we? Yeah. Where it almost started with Brexit, and then it moved on to lockdown policy, then it was Ukraine and Russia, and now it's Middle East. I feel the families this weekend sitting down, and there are so many topics which we can't discuss because it just is incendiary to talk about them, and I hate that.
But the fact of the matter is, identity politics has consumed public life. It's consumed the media, it's consumed academia, it's consumed our country. And we're forced to take sides. It's easy for me. I'm against the ones who kill babies. I'm against the ones who are terrorists. I'm against the ones who set fire to houses with elderly people. I'm against the ones who kidnap. It's an easy choice.
Well, but then you would say, well, you're against the ones who killed the babies first, and now there will be Palestinian and Gazan babies killed now.
Yeah, but it's not that's back to this idea of proportionality, a cold-hearted invasion, which what happened last Saturday. And so soon we have to accept that the same hatred of Jewish people is in our country. And we have to accept that the left, I think, have been shamefully silent on the whole on this issue. And I think we have this huge division in politics, this huge division where the BBC won't even call these people terrorists.
The other thing I think is
why not?
It shows what's going on at the moment in terms of that dispute spilling over here. Shows how terrible we've been in this country at the whole idea of integration and assimilation.
Yeah.
You know, we often hear the mantra from politicians, particularly the Mayor of London, who I don't dislike in the way that others might do, that diversity is our strength. Now, you may well wish for that to be true. You might well think that's the ideal, that's a high-minded thing. But the truth is, what we're seeing in London at the moment, it's the most stark example of it, is that it isn't our strength. No. Actually, it's our greatest challenge in many respects. And the way that we've just brought in millions of people over the years and said to them, right, now you're here, you know, we're going to tell you nothing about integration, we're going to tell you nothing about assimilating into our society, just go ahead and do your own thing and we won't trouble you. We went for the salad bowl rather than the melting pot.
We did, and we've got a ghettoisation.
And we're paying a price for it.
The ghettoisation is pretty obvious, and hopefully, as you say, I hope it doesn't kick off this weekend, but it's looking highly likely. Right, next up, the trial of former soldier Daniel Khalif. Do you remember? He allegedly escaped Wandsworth prison. Well, he definitely did escape Wandsworth prison. The trial's been put off today. What does it say about the surveillance in this country? Do you want more cameras reading your face or less? Don't go anywhere.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, this evening. I've still got with me trade unionist and author Paul Embry and GB News presenter, former Brexit Party MEP Martin Daubney. So, the trial of former soldier Daniel Khalif, who's accused of passing sensitive information to Iranian intelligence, has been put off today, following his alleged escape from Wandsworth prison, of course. Now, when you hear about this story, you can't help but think of like a 1980s novella and a film, The Shawshank Redemption, can you? Except it's 2023 and we live in one of the most surveilled countries in the world. So is surveillance failing? Paul, let me come to you. I don't want to live in a country that has a camera on every single corner. I don't want my face routinely scanned when I am not breaking the law. And yet there are people, especially off the back of this really high-profile case, calling to make that the norm in this country. Where do you sit on it?
I'm, with you on that in terms of being very reluctant to want to see that sort of society creeping in. But on the other hand, Bev, we do have thousands of criminals and would-be criminals who are taking advantage of the fact that our police force are no longer properly policing the streets, that our prisons are full and they probably won't go to prison, that the whole justice system, frankly, is creaking under the pressure and falling apart. And it seems to me, particularly with the shoplifting epidemic, that people out there are taking advantage of this situation more and more. And if cameras, more of them, can be effective in terms of bringing people to justice, leading to arrests, stopping crime from happening, giving victims of crime justice, then I'm inclined to say, actually, on balance, we should probably go with it. I guess the question is, would we actually have the resources if we do have lots more cameras and, we hit upon lots more criminals engaged in their criminal activities? Will we have the resources? Will the police charge, or the CPS charge these people? Will they actually get before the courts at all? Will they then ever go to prison when the prisons are full? The chances are probably not. So it may be an academic debate.
The idea that it would lead to some sort of crime-free utopia that we'd all be able to walk freely around the streets is we can sort of see in China, where they have huge amounts of facial recognition. It's anything but a utopia. They might have very little crime, but they also have very little freedom.
They have little crime.
But they have very little freedom.
And that's the balance, isn't it?
Well, let's have a look at the figures about it. So Met and South Wales, the Met and the South Wales Police facial recognition in 2016 to 2023 was over 89% inaccurate for finding the person. 89%. 3,000 people in this country have been wrongly identified by police facial recognition. It's already banned in San Francisco and 13 other cities. It just isn't good enough, Martin, to justify this mass rollout?
Well, we already live in a city with cameras in every street corner. It's called London, thanks to Sadiq Khan's ULEZ scheme. And why can't one of his cameras nick terrorists? Then people might actually like them. Isn't it amazing?
You found a way of crowbarring that in, didn't you?
Well, but the point is, you can't even drive around the block in a diesel van without getting nicked, but Daniel Khalif can wander around London for 4 days. That's my point. And I've been writing about surveillance schools since I first qualified as a journalist in 1995. Always been against being watched by Big Brother. But I think society has changed for the worse. And it gets back to the sort of people we don't even know who are in the country. Who are the people that are entering illegally via dinghies? We know there are at least 19 terrorists confirmed. That's what we know about.
But they will cover their faces.
But if, yeah,
that's the thing. I think if you want to insist on surveillance cameras on every corner of our street surveilling our faces, we also insist that you cannot cover up your face. And we have normalised mask wearing. That's why shoplifting's gone off the scale.
Precisely, and where I come from Peckham to work, you know, it's routine now for young lads to wear facial coverings. It's become part of their garb, part of their get-up. And in actual fact, those sort of lads were some of the very early adopters of face masks in the pandemic. They weren't concerned about the virus.
No,
it was a way of disguising themselves. It became trendy, it became fashionable, and it's an offence, say, for example, to wear an IRA balaclava. But you watch the protest tomorrow, there'll be Hamas scarves pulled around faces all over the streets of London. What's going to happen then? Why are they covering their faces if they're so pro-Palestine? Why are these people going to be wrapping their faces up? Because they know they don't want to get nicked by facial recognition technology. That is why I think this debate's moved on.
But you see, I don't want to have to change. I don't want to have to be scanned walking down every street corner. I mean, you could just say, well, chill out, Bev. I used to be, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. And then I felt that the tentacles of the state during the last 3 years enter into my life in ways that I found absolutely unimaginable, and I craved being able to make decisions for myself. And so I find this absolutely shocking, because the wrong uns will always cover their face up anyway, Paul. It'll be the three of us not committing any crimes. It will be on databases all around the world.
There's an argument then to say we should have an anti-mask law in this country, like they've got, by the way, in many European countries, including some of the what are regarded as quite enlightened European countries like Sweden and Denmark, for example. They've got it in France as well. There's an argument to say we should have that in public places, or certainly on public demonstrations. A friend of my family started university a few weeks ago. His third night outside his sort of halls of residence, he was approached by two youngsters wearing COVID masks, threatened to stab him, stole his phone, took all of his money. So it's always the balance. I've got a close friend who's in China at the moment and knows China quite well, an English person. And he, you know, he doesn't deny that actually there's a very sort of high surveillance type of state there. That's unquestionable. But he said at the same time, most people are not bothered about it.
Yeah, but let me give you an example of China.
Because the crime is really low. When there's a serious crime, it's such a surprise to everyone. They're so shocked. So that's the balance.
You stand at the zebra crossing in China. There's no car coming for miles. But if there is not a green man, or whatever the Chinese equivalent is of the flashing green, and you cross that, then your face is surveilled and you'll get a ticket in your post and your social credit score will be affected. I don't want to live in that world, Martin.
No, but they also have a respect, or is it a fear, for law and order, because the Chinese don't mess about if you start breaking laws. And that's what I think the problem is in Britain. We have a complete disrespect and a breakdown of law and order. It's the point where people wearing masks, people parading around with their Hamas scarves, people parading around ripping down posts. They know they won't really get nicked. And I think this is part of a broader breakdown of that respect for law and order. And there's a feeling that the police take the knee to Black Lives Matter, they dance the Macarena, that the pronoun police, they're not putting the boot in when it's needed. And so therefore, if they need extra help, shouldn't be granted to them.
But you know what we're giving up? You know, we're just surrendering. We're just surrendering morality. We're just surrendering morality. We're going, just do what you want. You know what? You only behave well because you might get caught behaving badly. I want kids to be brought up to think, I'm going to behave well because it's the right thing to do, not because someone's going to have a picture of my face and I'm going to knock on the door.
There has been, and it sounds a terribly right-wing thing for someone on the left like me to say it, but there has been, I agree with Martin, there's been a breakdown in what you might call that universal moral code that used to bind people in this country. And I don't accept the idea, peddled by lots of people on the left, some of them my colleagues, that there is this kind of inexorable path between poverty or hardship and committing crime.
No.
And I think that, the proof that that isn't right is if you go back to the 1930s, when there was real poverty and hardship and destitution in this country. You had, millions unemployed, you had hunger marches and things like that. And crime was still relatively low because there was that moral code. You didn't have an epidemic of people going into shops and robbing stuff.
That's where we have to somehow work out
It's not all about your economic status and your position.
You've been getting in touch at home. Very divisive, this, Andy. The more surveillance, the better. It prevents crime and terrorism. ID cards, too, if you've got nothing to hide. What's the problem? So much is the problem. We don't even have time to go into it today. And also, Paul's saying we certainly need to embrace facial recognition. It'll be a valuable asset in identifying and tracking down terrorists. It won't. They'll just cover up their faces. Right, still to come before 7 o'clock tonight, a trio of trans-related stories that have caught my eye and why Martin Daubney is to blame. Find out in a few minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Thank you for sticking with us. This is Bev Turner sitting in for Michelle. This week she will be back on Monday. Now, 3 stories which caught my eye today, which are all sort of very similar, same topic. Trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney won UK Magazine's first Woman of the Year. That is right. Transgender cyclists. So transgender women who were men have taken gold and silver medals at Chicago women's race. Critics were insisting that the pair had considerable biological advantage over their female rivals, obviously. And also, this is a belter, Lloyds Bank sent an email out to their staff, 30,000 of their staff, telling them that they would offer them counselling if they were triggered by Conservative Party conference trans rhetoric. Now, How did we get to this place? Martin Daubney, I blame you.
Why?
So, 25 years ago, or thereabouts, you were editing Loaded magazine.
Yeah.
Right, the land of the lads mag.
Yeah.
And this was the start when I think we quite quickly accelerated the idea of female traditional women's traditional behaviour and very male behaviour. And it was the creation of the ladette.
Oh.
Do you remember?
Yeah,
Zoe Ball coming out on her wedding day with a Jack Daniels in her hand.
And you were one, weren't you? You were a ladette.
Well, this is the thing, right? So I was in your magazine. You will have had pictures of me in my underwear on your desk, Martin Daubney.
I've still got them.
He's still got them, yeah. He's still got them. He was showing me earlier. He was showing me off camera.
But listen, my point is, so 25 years ago, when that quite quickly changed, and the idea that women didn't have to be feminine, men could also be more feminine and less masculine.
Yeah.
And we've got to this place now where nobody knows what they are anymore, and we're turning into this sort of hegemonic mass of neither female, neither male. And I think we need to get back to understanding that we are fundamentally different.
Yeah, hear to that. I mean, I've been accused of many things about editing Loaded, but never been responsible for the trans epidemic. But what we've seen with these three stories are again, an indulgence of a fantasy. That's what it is. It's a fantasy belief system, which we've all been expected to just kind of kowtow to. Otherwise, we're transphobes. And I think, again, we're going through the mirror on this because it's clearly ridiculous that a man with a penis is Woman of the Year. It's clearly ridiculous that Labour MPs can't even say that a man with a penis isn't a woman. And it's clearly obvious that somebody born male shouldn't be able to compete against women because they're going to annihilate them because of biological differences.
I think it was Jermaine Gray who said one is not born but becomes a woman. And this is the idea that gender, being feminine, being masculine, is a social construct. It's about the pressures that we feel as children to either play with dolls or hit things with hammers and build Lego, that we impose these gender stereotypes on children from a very young age. I used to think that was a thing. And then I had a son, and I'd said, I'm not going to bring him up to be macho, and I'm going to let him play with dolls if he wants to. He didn't want to play with dolls. He just wanted to just destroy things and climb up walls and smash things. And one day he bit a Jacob's cream cracker into a gun and tried to shoot me with it. And I thought that biological imperative is there. And I feel like we've neglected that. Do we need to get back to a time when we think about who we are as mammalian? Like, your instincts will be different to mine.
Certainly true. Biologically, men and women clearly are different. I don't think that means that we should assume that a boy, for example, wouldn't want to play with dolls, or a girl wouldn't want to play with trucks, or dress up as a footballer or whatever. I think people should be absolutely free to do those things without any barriers or discrimination or harassment. But at the same time, this kind of construct, and it is a social construct, as you said, of gender, some people think can trump the whole idea of scientific reality and biological sex, and I'm afraid it can't. And I would cross any road. If I saw, a trans person being bullied or harassed, I'd cross any road to defend that person. But that doesn't mean that I have to accept that person is something biologically that they clearly are not. And this Lloyd's story particularly struck me because it's another demonstration, I think, and I was writing about exactly this on my Substack yesterday, of how these institutions have just been captured by what actually is quite an extreme ideology.
Yeah, it is.
But the reason it's been able to take hold so much is because, if you like, the sensible majority in this country have just been fearful about pushing back.
Which kind of turns into which ties with the earlier conversation about the fact that you have to have a position on everything and you have to be on the right side of the narrative.
And what we need, to be perfectly blunt, what we need is a bit more courage among people, particularly people in positions of influence. There are too many people out there who are afraid to put their head over the parapet because they think they're going to be cancelled. And for as long as we've got people in positions of influence who are doing that and kowtowing in that way, then these fringe ideologies take off. I mean, go back 5 years and say to yourself that a Prime Minister would stand in front of his party conference, as Rishi Sunak did, and feel the need to say, a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and that's common sense, and you shouldn't be bullied into saying otherwise. You would think, what on earth has happened to this society in the last 5 years to force a Prime Minister to say something like that? I mean, it's completely insane, and we need to call it out every time stuff like that.
Is that how we call it out, or do you bring back lads mags and remind people what a woman looks like?
Well, there's quite a few people out there would like Loaded to be reborn for older people and called it Oldered. I've been sort of wooed back into that world, but I do think a lot of people look back to that as an innocent time of escapism. It was slandered by its critics, always was at the time. It was meant to annoy the feminist community.
It was proper
meant
sexist.
to annoy those people.
I was stood in your studio in my bra and knickers thinking, what am I doing? The boy, like Dermot O'Leary doesn't have to do this. Johnny Vaughan doesn't have to do this.
Did you get paid well for it?
No, I didn't get paid anything.
Did you not?
No.
SCADA, obviously.
You got paid well in my day. Things got better. I was a feminist.
But it wasn't about. But then I wouldn't have wanted to be paid for it. But this is clearly a conversation we need to carry on off air, not least because you owe me some money, Martin. Right, that's it, Paul Martin. Thank you so much. I've had a brilliant week. I've loved sitting here for Michelle. She will be back on Monday. You're on the telly over the weekend.
Yes, I'm on 12 till 3 tomorrow. GB News Saturday. Please tune in for more Common Sense.
Martin, and I will be back on Monday morning at 9:30 with Britain's Newsroom. Up next is Lee Anderson's Real World. Have a great weekend.
Good evening. It's turning colder out there. A much chillier weekend ahead. There'll be some autumn sunshine and a few showers, particularly so tomorrow. We've seen some fairly wet weather today from this area of low pressure. That is starting to pull away, but behind it, we've got the colder air, and that will be very noticeable for all of us through the weekend. Still some pretty heavy downpours, though, across the extreme southeast for a time this evening before that clears away. And then we'll have showers keeping going for Northern Ireland and Northern Scotland. Getting very windy tonight across Northern Scotland, especially so through Shetland. A very blustery night here. Elsewhere, it will be the cold you notice, with temperatures well down into single figures. A much colder night in the south compared to recent nights. But there should be quite a bit of sunshine around on Saturday morning for southern Scotland, eastern and southern England. Some showers for Wales, northwest England and Northern Ireland. And we'll keep some showers going across the west coast of Scotland and in northern Scotland, where the winds will only slowly ease and the showers will fall as snow over the hills as temperatures struggle in the single digits. Further south, we might squeak into the teens, but everywhere feeling colder. And a cold start to Sunday with a greater chance of a touch of frost, certainly from northern England northwards. Again, though, many places having a sparkling start with some good spells